Hello, welcome to the Talking City podcast, coming to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name's Joe Bray, joined by Simon Bajkowski, and we've got a lot to talk about in terms of Real Madrid. And Pep said he didn't know which Man City team would turn up against Real. In the first half, he was probably pleasantly surprised. In the second half, a lot of familiar signs and a couple more injuries in there just for good luck. It was sort of a game that summed up the season. That's not a new sort of a point to make, is it, Si? But started well, injuries hamper it, opposition come back into it. You think there's a bit of life with that second goal, and then the collapse and sort of despondency and despair at the end. It just felt like 8 to 9 months in the space of 90 minutes.
It did, and it did because there were a lot of times where it didn't. Both sort of they had a really good start. The second half, they came out really strong, trying to turn 1-0 into 2-0. When Real scored, and it was a jammy goal from Real, they were then on top, and you then thought, oh, here we go, City is struggling. To then get back into the game and win the penalty to score, make it 2-1 with 10 minutes to go, that is so unlike City this season. You were like, this is, really something else, which only makes the familiar collapse worse, really. I thought it was a terrific performance for so much of the game, but it's the same old story in the end.
Well, let's split it into those two parts, whether it's the first 45 or the first hour or the first 70 minutes or whatever. It was very good, and at half time we were all sat there thinking, this is going well, but not just going well, they're playing well. And I think it helped that they had, for the first time this season, all four of the centre-backs there, and you've got Akanji at right back, and you just feel a bit more safe with him there against Vinicius. And they're getting shots away Real Madrid, but the City are keeping them out, and they're getting bodies in front, and John Stones is looking like it's Istanbul all over again. And it's a system that Pep's chosen and looks to be working, because you've got Akanji and Gvardiol coming in as that sort of both inverting to make a 2-3-4-1 formation. It felt like this is how City should be playing this season. If Pep had all of his players available, even without Rodri, that's the system he wanted to go for. And the result was you score a brilliant goal to go ahead against Real Madrid, and you keep them just about at arm's length.
I mean, the sort of questions when the team was announced were, there's 5 centre-backs in that team. How will that work? Well, they kept Madrid out for the first half. John Stones was terrific in central midfield, and Gvardiol got an assist. And the other question was Jack Grealish preferred over Phil Foden or Marmoush or Doku. How will that work? And it was his ball, pretty much identical to the one he played at Leyton Orient for De Bruyne, that was to Gvardiol that made the first goal. So in terms of a team paying off with a plan, it was perfect. And I'm not saying Real didn't have chances, because they did, and had a few good saves in the first half. And there were a lot of good blocks from the defenders in the first half. But that is kind of, what a good defense does. And at half time, I don't think it could have gone any better, other than the injury to Grealish after 20 minutes, and then the injury to Akanji towards the end of the first half. That meant that when it was half time, you kind of knew Akanji wasn't coming back out.
Yeah, you could see the way he was down and the concern of the players just before, because he'd done so well to send Vinicius back and to the line, and he blocked it for a corner, and then he stays down, and you're fearing the worst, and then he's hobbling heavily as he goes off. And the result of that is that Rico Lewis comes on, and we know Rico is a very good player, but he's 1, out of form, and 2, his strong point is not necessarily one-on-one defending. So against Vinicius, and then Madrid pretty ruthlessly moved Kylian Mbappe over to that side, he didn't really stand a chance. But it's not his game, and he wasn't played from the start for that very reason, but he just had to be. And it felt like from then Real stepped it up a little bit. And even though, they got the equaliser, and then City got got the other goal, it felt like they had a way through that defence that they didn't previously have.
They did, however, again, Ederson made a few good saves and the other defenders helped, but the Mbappe goal was the first Real equaliser was off Mbappe's shin. He's not intending to hit it like that, and it was also from a set piece. It's City not responding well enough at a set piece, and it's Ake playing Mbappe on side, which has nothing to do with Lewis. So until 85 minutes, Lewis coming on has weakened City and has forced them to adapt, but they're still winning the game.
Yeah, I mean, can't argue with that. And I mean, the second Real Madrid equaliser comes from the other side as well. So not much that you can say on Lewis. I just think it was harsh on him. I don't think he was in a position where he could have really done much, because he's got probably two of the world's best three players both attacking him and running inside and outside. And I'm not sure he got the support that he needed from his winger. And I mean, where Stones was helping out in the first half, he couldn't, for various reasons, do that in the second half, and it sort of gave them that opportunity. But as we say, City go ahead, and Foden, who's come on for Grealish, who changes the dynamic a bit, but he hadn't necessarily got involved too much, wins a penalty, Haaland scores it, and you're thinking, if they can take this lead to the Bernabeu, this is a brilliant result, probably the best result of the season. And then it's an all too familiar collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it was a statement performance. Like, it would have been the performance of the season. It was the result of the season. Result, like, of maybe the best result since, I don't know, they beat Real 4-0 at home in terms of, expectation against performance. And then it all goes wrong. And Ederson, who has played out of his skin, probably his best performance of the season, hits it straight, and then it's a poor parry into Brahim Diaz's path. And also, you'd see on the clip afterwards, like, Kovacic not keeping up with Brahim. Kovacic only came on as a substitute. Brahim did as well, but like, it's poor when you bring a substitute on to keep control, and he lets a runner go free. So that's 2-2 with 5 minutes to go. And then the stadium gets nervous again and edgy, and it's ridiculous, like, lazy backheel flick from Kovacic. Lewis hesitates, Vinicius pounces, Ederson comes out. Bellingham's got an empty net. I think you saw, Stones was trying to keep up with Bellingham but couldn't. He was absolutely fuming. And that continued into his post-match interview, where he said it's just not good enough. And it's really not. I think, there is no shame in losing to Real Madrid. There is no shame in going out to Real Madrid. But when you've been 2-1 up with 5 minutes to go, I think there's a bit of shame in the game management from there, because they'd done so well at 0-0, at 1-0, at 1-1, at 2-1. It just all fell apart.
There was a quote from Savinho earlier in the week that said he's spoken to Real Madrid players on international duty, and he's spoken to Bernardo and other players, and there is a consensus and a belief within the Madrid dressing room that even if they're 2 or 3 down, they never feel like they're beaten. And if you couple that with how City have been folding at times, I mean, it's easy to say, but you would think that they would just shut up shop. And there were 2 or 3 very bad decisions in that goal. I know a lot of the criticism has been aimed at Lewis, but I think Kovacic and then probably Ederson are more to blame for what they've done in that goal as well. So I mean, we spoke to Nathan Ake afterwards, and we said, do you know why it keeps happening? Because he said we still haven't learned from it. And they don't know why they keep collapsing like this, which feels like a massive worry. But also a lot of it is just individual mistakes. And Kovacic, if he puts that ball into the stand, City get a draw. if Ederson stays on his line, he leaves Vinicius with a decision to make. And I mean, in the first half, there was a penalty he gave away that was saved by the offside flag. That he knows Vinicius more than anyone in the City squad because he's faces him in training for Brazil, but he still didn't. He still felt like he was always losing that battle 1-on-1, and it was a calamity of errors, which not for the first time has cost City.
Yeah, and I think, it's fair to say, it's Real, kings of the Champions League, I never know when they were beaten. Real is still really scarred from losing 4-0 here. And like Bellingham said after the game, he don't care what form City are in, it's City. Like, City are a huge deal in Madrid. And if they'd come here and City had beaten them, I think, we watched City all season, so Real would still have been favourites for the second leg. But there would have been a bit of doubt in Real minds because everyone was saying this team was done, was finished, and they've still beaten us 2-1. And Haaland scored against us now, so that's also a worry. But instead, they go back thinking, yeah, they're as bad as everyone says they are. Maybe not as bad, but that it doesn't matter because it's the same result.
As beatable.
And I think, John Stones said afterwards, I don't know whether we need to manage the game differently, whether that's go long or play short. And it's like, right, so nobody has any idea what to do. Do we boot it into Rose Ed or do we try and rondo our way to a 2-1 wins? Either or. It's just worrying basically for the rest of the season that the mistakes keep happening. And for me as well, Pep keeps saying that it's not psychological. Right then, well, it's just players making error after error after error. So they probably shouldn't be here if they keep making errors every week. And it's not, psychological is like something that can afflict a team together that they can then get out of. You can change your mentality, but it's much more difficult to change someone who's just error prone every single week, as we've seen with the club captain who's now at AC Milan because he kept giving a goal away every time he played.
Yeah, this mentality thing, I understand why Pep is not saying, if Pep comes out and says we have a massive confidence issue and a mentality problem, that's the headline. City are labelled with that for the whole season forever. But like you say, if it's not that, what is it? I think it feels clear that there is some sort of thing in the back of their heads that they no longer believe that they can keep out teams late on, and every chance is going to be costly. And that's fine because I think the season has shown that these players are only human and they're not as invincible maybe physically and mentally as we thought. That's absolutely fine. But I think they do. There has to be some sort of admission, especially when Ake's saying we don't know why it's happening. If you can't put your finger on anything specifically, it's got to be something in the mentality, either collectively or individually. And I mean, Kovacic panics when that ball bounces to him. Even if City winning 3 or 4-0, that's not the right ball to play back to Lewis.
Does he though? Does he panic or does he just play the wrong ball?
I mean, if he's not panicking,
I don't know.
What's he doing?
Well, that's it. But maybe he's not panicking. Maybe he just thinks that is the right pass to make in that situation. And I think it's more of a mental issue than Pep is saying, but I also don't think that mental issues can kind of absolve everyone. When it keeps happening for this long, it's just kind of, it's a concern.
And especially if you look at the fixtures coming up, you won't go into those games thinking, they're definitely gonna. You can trust these players to see out 90 minutes basically, because that's what they're not doing. But it's frustrating because the first hour was so good, and it was more like the City that we used to. I think I wrote a couple of times. It was like being back in 2023 when they beat everyone in the way. And even at the start of the rubbish run at the start of the season, we were thinking, they always have a run where everything comes together and they have that mentality and resolve. But you don't say that's going to happen this season.
No. And before the game, there was kind of a bit of talk of like, could this game be the springboard to really sort of get City back? And they did look back for a hell of a long time. But yeah, and it's a real shame for people like Haaland, who has slogged his guts out all season and then gets his 2 goals against Madrid, scores the penalty 10 minutes from time, that thinks he's won the game for them to set them up really well in the tie. And then that happens, and it's just like, yeah, you may as well not have bothered.
There's a video of Haaland when that second goal goes in on City's website, the pit cam video, and he is absolutely seething. He's walking around in circles. He gets the ball. He's shouting at anyone who'll listen, and then at full time, he just walks in the straightest of lines down the tunnel, shakes the hand of 1 or 2 players who are in the way, but I think he even like moves Rico Lewis out the way to be the first one down the tunnel, and you can understand why he's annoyed. And he actually came through the mix zone on his way out, and one brave reporter said, "Oh, Erling, have you got a minute for a question?" And he just internally scoffed and went, no chance.
Yeah.
In a single word, it was the most emphatic of no's you've ever heard.
And it's good. It's good that they're angry. No one's saying that they don't care anymore. But it's just the performance levels aren't good enough. We're kind of in a 1920 performance level where, I don't think they've played anywhere near as well as they did in 1920, but where like you can play well for most of a game, but then you make an inexplicable mistake that costs you the game. But they're also in a sort of 16-17 position where you're like, how many of these players next season? How many of these players deserve to stay next season? And it's kind of a dwindling bunch when you see performances like that.
I'm sure that's a topic we can come on to with potentially some free midweeks coming up. And that's the question, isn't it? Because the chances, the belief of City going and winning this tie have just dropped dramatically. I think it would take, if this was meant to be the performance of the season, performance of the last 2 years, it will take something even more at the Bernabeu to turn it around. I think they can score, but I think Madrid will be very confident. You saw the way Madrid celebrated. I think Ancelotti's been speaking about keeping them grounded, but they were celebrating. They knew how big that result was because they'll back themselves against anyone at the Bernabeu. I think that was City's first defeat against Real at home, first defeat at home in the Champions League since 2018. But put them at the Bernabeu and it's a second leg, it's a different story.
Yeah, nobody is expecting them to come from behind and beat Real. It would be an all-time. It would be the best result they've had against Real. It would be better than the 4-0 if they were to beat Real at Real.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't think it's completely over. I think there might be another twist, but I think Madrid can start looking ahead to who they face in the next round. But you just, as Pep said in the first leg, you don't know who's going to turn up, and it might happen. It will be harder without Manu Akanji and any other absentees. We are forgetting, of course, before we go to a quick break, Si, the main reason City lost this game was because of a bit of cloth in the stand before the game. Vinicius wasn't up for it before the game, and then he saw this banner and thought, you know what, I might have a game here. I might show up. First of all, great banner.
Yeah. Great banner. Good banner. People just like to criticize everything, but it's like you go to Real Madrid, you go to Bayern Munich, they put out a big banner at the start of the game that says, "This is us, you better be worried, boys." And for me, City did that. It was you put out a banner to sort of trumpet your triumphs, and Rodri winning the Ballon d'Or was huge, and it was disrespectful for Real not to go. It was disrespectful for Ancelotti on the eve of the game, asked if he now regretted it, to say, no, we don't. Oh, we respect Rodri, but Vinicius should have won it. Like, it was disrespectful. And I didn't see, I thought it was a good banner and a banner to get Madrid riled up. And once Madrid win, I thought Ancelotti gave a brilliant quote afterwards where he said, I don't know if Vinicius saw it, but if he did see it, then he will have been very motivated by it, as you can see by his performance. And you're like, right. So you don't know if his performance is dictated by the banner, but it could definitely have been right. Okay. No one was talking about it until 5 minutes before the end when they scored 2 goals. And also, nobody mentions the effect it had on City. Maybe City wouldn't have been as up for it if not everyone saw that banner, because the 1894 group who did it tweeted the banner on the day of the game, said this is what's happening, and it created a stir. And everyone, it was like be in your seats early to see this and get this. And the atmosphere, I know a lot has been said about the crowd, and that is maybe a separate discussion, but I still thought the atmosphere was one of the best it's been, if not the best this season. And
that first half, especially, cheering slide tackles.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
I think you have to put some of that down to the banner. So, I don't think City would have been as up for it without that.
It's one of them in nature. It's provocative. You're not going to put that out and say, oh, why are you offended? Real Madrid did what they did, and that's a response from the City fans. And yeah, like you say, when Real Madrid win, that's always going to be a factor. If City win, either there's no talk of the banner, or it's look how good this banner was and look how humbled Vinicius is. But I think the idea that Vinicius has walked out and seen that and only then decided that he's motivated for that game is different. Everything we've heard from Vinicius and Madrid is that they feel completely sort of it's such an unjust decision. It's not going to change a thing. And I mean, Rodri was there pitch side before the game looking at the Real Madrid players as they ran out, and he was laughing and taking pictures. And as he walks out, he says it was very good. I think it was a entertaining side note, but it wasn't the reason City lost the game. And it's taken on a life of its own, really.
If I was a City fan going to Madrid, I would take that banner and I would unfurl it at full time, because whatever the result on next Wednesday, Rodri's still beating Vinicius to the Ballon d'Or, and Real Madrid, as they showed before the game, are still very upset about it.
There you are. A bit of advice for you if you are heading to Madrid. Have you got any room in your hand luggage for that side?
Absolutely none. No.
I saw. Obviously, we saw it on Twitter. I did not expect it to be that big. It was very impressive, and I think 10 out of 10 for inventiveness and execution. And whatever has happened, it's had the desired effect of it's made its mark, and it's been heard in Madrid. So we'll park Madrid for the time being, because there is a massive game in the Premier League. We'll be back after a short break to discuss Newcastle at home on Saturday. Hello, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. City's main aim every season is to qualify for the Champions League. Normally, it's a bit more assured than it is now. The title is not within City's grasp. Maybe top 4, top 5 is also not in the grasp, but the next few games will determine whether it is Newcastle level on points with City. Are they level on goal difference as well, or is it they're ahead, but whether it's how close they are on goal difference, I'm not entirely sure. I was just speaking to a Newcastle fan who seemed to say it was alphabetical order, so that's why I asked. But 3 points for either team is going to be absolutely massive in the race for a Champions League spot. We're expecting Nottingham Forest to drop off just because Nottingham Forest don't finish in the top 4, but everything they do suggests they are firm contenders. So this is going to be a huge game, and City can't afford to think about the Bernabeu for a second this weekend. It's got to be all about Newcastle.
Yes, to an extent. Although, if you're Pep, you might say we have 14 chances to get into the top 5, whereas we only have 1 to go through in the Champions League. But yeah, on the back of that Real Madrid, it becomes a horrendous week if Newcastle come to the Etihad and beat them, which they're very capable of doing because they've got a very good team. That I think what you would say is Newcastle have never really turned up at the Etihad. They've had a very good team for
Never
a very
won.
good few years. Yeah, they've given City problems every time City have gone up to St James's. And then they've come. I mean, last season sticks out for me because it was a few days after City had played in the Super Cup. And you're thinking, Eddie Howe's team, really fresh, not in Europe. Or were they in Europe? Well, don't matter. They haven't played in the Super Cups. They'd had a week. And came and were absolutely limp, and City beat them 1-0. And that was a huge win for City. But Newcastle, saw City were there for the taking and just didn't turn up. So it's, I think as much as I think if City lose on Saturday, people will still think they will make the top 4, top 5. Whereas you might say the same for Newcastle if they lose, but it will be another sign that kind of Newcastle aren't quite ready to become the team that people think they can be if they don't win. So in a funny sort of way, I feel like the pressure is on Newcastle as much as it's on City on Saturday, if that makes any sense.
No, I think that's fair, and we've made a lot of City's fixtures coming up, and after this in the league, it's Liverpool, Spurs, and Forest. They're going to be defining in City's top 4, top 5 hopes. But for Newcastle, they've got City, Forest, Liverpool in the next 3 games. That's also going to be a defining run for both City and Newcastle, and also for Forest as well. So I think the next few weeks, it's not necessary as much as it is a sort of 3-pointer, 6-pointer, whatever you want to call it, for that top 4 spot. The next few weeks are also going to be quite defining, and Liverpool will have a role to play. And if Forest can come through that little run where they've got, I'm looking at their fixtures now. They've got Fulham next, but they've got Newcastle, Arsenal, City, and United in the next 5 or 6 games. They're going to have to sort of put their money where their mouth is as well. So I think maybe in a month's time it'll be a bit clearer. But I do think this result it's something that City can control. It's not relying on anyone else. It's beat a direct rival, move 3 points ahead of them, weaken the goal difference. Off you go. And I'm wondering whether Anthony Gordon against Rico Lewis is a bit of a mismatch. You got Isaac who's scoring a lot of goals, and you've no idea who's going to play in City's defence if anyone is match fit for 90 minutes. Can you afford to play John Stones again, either at number 5 or number 6, and ask him to play in Madrid and play 3 games in 8 days? Because Pep's already said he can't really do that. Diaz is coming back. He's only played a game and a half since his injury. Ake couldn't complete 90 minutes. It's going to be quite as I say, I was just on a Newcastle podcast, and I think I made the point. It's probably Newcastle's best chance to get a result at the Etihad, having never won there in the Premier League.
It's everyone's best chance of getting a result at the Etihad this season. Yeah. That's the unfortunate truth of it. But yeah, it sounds like a really exciting February and March, then a really dull April and May. Has everyone just got relegation fodder for the last 2 months of the season? Everyone playing each other now. It's one of those things, and Newcastle will have to view City within this group of difficult games that they've got and work out what they're going to do. And it's easier for them because they've not got Europe, but they've got the cup final with Liverpool to start thinking about a little bit. And it like I say, it is a test for Newcastle to see can they take advantage. They caused City problems in the reverse game, but then City went ahead. They got the penalty to equalise, but it was one of those where City were vulnerable then. I think it was the first game or the first league game without Rodri. City were pretty ropey trying to find a sort of way through without Rodri, and Newcastle could have beaten them but didn't. So it's I think City would probably take a point and no injuries if they were given the chance now, because I do think the first half against Madrid, the first 80 minutes, whatever, you sort of say, if we can have this performance for most of our games, then we'll be absolutely fine. It's just the injuries do worry you, because it's been like this since since October. So you can't really call it a blip or anything like that. It's just taken over the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, this is the conversation I was just having. I was sort of going down the path of, Newcastle are going to overrun the midfield with Guimaraes and Tonali and Joe Linton, and you think that's probably quite a competitive battle against whoever City play. And then you got Gordon back and Isaac and all of these players. You can see how Newcastle, if they're going to win, will do it because it's happened so many times this season. But if City, whoever play, can replicate that first half system against Real Madrid and keep Gordon inside and keep everything quite compact and play it and keep it on the ground and do it that way, and maybe play, I don't know, Doku or Savinho, or Phil Foden comes back and maybe Marmoush, I think it's maybe a game for him, and you got all those options. As ever, City are as good as, when they're on the ball, as good as anyone. It's just, can they find that balance and keep those transitions to a minimum? And it's a run where they can't afford to think about the opposition, really, because they're coming up against brilliant players and brilliant attackers every week. So they've just got to find a way to get ahead. And as much as we're saying, the Madrid game, disappointing ending, they still scored twice. And like we say, they controlled that game. It's probably more important for most of it. So I think Newcastle have the weapons to expose City's weaknesses quite emphatically, but also City have the option, and they have that system now in place from Madrid that they know works. And if they can take that forward, even if it's Lewis instead of Akanji, can potentially sort of get them back. And Newcastle never, as you say, turn up at the Etihad. So is that going to play a role as well? Are they going to feel like they're not going to have the ball? So I don't know. I genuinely don't know how the game's going to go. If you can pick that up from my seesaw answer.
Yeah, well, it follows the conversation around City, and you don't know which team's going to turn up, basically. Like, City have all the players and not all the players they'd want, but City have the players they need to win the game. But so do Newcastle. And it's another game where City's midfield has not been good this season. And increasingly, you're facing teams where you're saying your midfield is better than our field. And Newcastle's certainly one of those games. So Newcastle have the tools at their disposal to dominate the game, play it the way they want to play it, and come away with 3 points. But you have people like Erling Haaland who might have something to say about that. And it is a home game where City should be stronger, and Newcastle should have less hope than they would have at home. So I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be a close match between two good teams who both have their weaknesses. It's one of those where I don't really think you can call it.
I'm surprised this one isn't on TV. It feels like one where...
do you know, I think it's around the Champions League. I think there was so much uncertainty around whether City would be in the playoff and things like that. I think they just said, we're putting this at Saturday 3:00, and then it doesn't matter if you play Tuesday, Wednesday the week before, or Tuesday, Wednesday the week afterwards. We're not sort of having it Sunday 4:30 and then, oh wait, you've got to... I think it's one of that, because it does feel like, one of the standout fixtures in the weekend, and City Newcastle is kind of almost always on TV, isn't it?
It's always competitive, even if it's a game where, I don't know, City win 1-0. It's always tight and there's something going on, and especially this time, you don't know which way it's going to swing at all. It could be a big home win or a tight away win, or a lot of different things. We're sort of hearing reports that Manu Akanji might be out for a little bit longer. It feels like just as they get the back four back, it's gone, and he's not been perfect this season, but he has been there, which is probably more important. How big of a blow could that be, especially against Madrid and Newcastle coming up in the next few days?
Yeah, huge. And, I don't think he's been amazing this season. But I think it's, Akanji, Gvardiol, Haaland, Bernardo Silva, Rico Lewis have all just played regardless of how good they feel in themselves and sort of that's fitness and form really, because Pep has said there's nobody else you have to play. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Akanji looked better with a better defense around him and the same backline with everyone helping each other out. It just, on Tuesday night, that first half, it felt like every defender knew where each of the back four was going to be at any given time. And that way they weren't caught out. And Ederson the same. Ederson knew when to come and when not to, because he knew sort of how fast Ruben Diaz was or how fast Nathan Ake was and what they'd be doing and things like that. So huge blow if Akanji is out for months, because it is one of those things. The story of City used to be, it doesn't matter who you put in the 11, they'll beat you, and now it really does matter who you put in the 11.
Because obviously, if you have Ruben Diaz and Nathan Ake as the partnership, or John Stones, if they're fit and firing, you're not getting past them. But they've not been fit this season, so you can't tell. And like we've said with John Stones, you can't rely on him to be there. And Nathan Ake's fitness is well documented. It's not great. Even Diaz, who never got injured, is now in and out of the team.
Yeah, and maybe you don't want to put Kusanov up against Isak and Gordon, but it'd be really interesting to see what happens with Kusanov, because he is one who I think is being primed that they could kind of come in and solidify that right-hand side of defence, whether it be, right back or right centre-back. He did have a much better game against Leyton Orient than he did on his debut. A bit of positive cheer from that, and you do wonder whether Kusanov could be the one that really steps in to help if Akanji is out.
I think long term, yes. Short term, maybe not. Just given the level of opposition.
Yeah, but he's got to come in at some point. So when's he come in? That's the. Does he come in at Real? Does he come in against Liverpool? Does he come in at Spurs? Does he come in at Forest? It's, maybe a home game against Newcastle is the time to do it.
That's exactly the reason why it's not as simple as saying, "Oh, just give him a half an hour here and then an hour and then play it." Play it forward. It's a fixture list that isn't very forgiving for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of chatter online about playing him at right back as the main solution, but I'm not sure a new signing, especially with how he did in that debut, did like you say very well against Leyton Orient, but as well as they played, they are a League One side. Anthony Gordon is a different proposition, and Vinicius is a different proposition, and Gakpo or Salah, as we know. So it's something for Guardiola to ponder. I'm sure he will give you a little bit of insight if he's feeling generous in the press conference later today, and maybe a bit of more of a confirmation or a diagnosis on Akanji. And I mean, for Grealish as well, who went off a couple of promising performances and he looked gutted. He said on Instagram he hopes it's not too bad, that injury, but he's another where you're just about to get back and you just see a spark of something that is more like the player that you're used to, and then it's another setback. So, I mean, on the back of his couple of games, you would say, he's probably in line to start, but now he's injured. It's tricky.
Yeah, and what was really interesting, I thought, was something we didn't hear because we're at the game, but Alan Shearer on commentary blaming the VAR delay for Grealish's injury. I can't remember. Was Foden warming up before City scored?
Foden was warming up from about 10 minutes in, because we noticed that and said, right, that's odd. No one looks injured.
Yeah. No, because Grealish came off about 10 minutes after City scored, but Foden's warming up before City scored. But just, Alan Shearer basically saying a 4-minute delay, and it was unacceptable, or inexplicable. Like the whole thing from UEFA was like, we've got semi-automated offside, so that means that we can spot offsides quicker, and now it's coming to English football, so we should be really pleased because it cuts down the time, and then it's 4 minutes, and you're like, well, he's either offside or he's not, and you've got this automated thing that surely makes it as black and white as offside can be, and it was a joke. It was like, how is this taking so long? We weren't sort of blessed with loads of replays of it either. It was all kind of happening in the dark. Everyone
Well, I
just
thought for a
stood,
while it was
wait.
maybe, did they think that Guardiola had handled it with his shoulder or something when he, I don't know whether they were looking at that, but it was strange.
We don't know what they were looking at, really, do we? Like
Mm-hmm.
the whole process just took far longer than anyone on earth thought it should take. But yeah, Alan Shearer saying everyone stood around for 4 minutes. That's not going to help top footballers avoid injury. And yeah, just thought that was an interesting point of view from someone who has played the game and is still very much involved in the game.
Yeah, you don't hear that often. It doesn't feel like it should impact. It's no different to an injury for someone, or I don't know, but yeah, like you say,
but it's a stop-start, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, if Foden was warming up before the goal, then maybe he had a problem before then. But it was.
I mean, my first thought when Foden was warming up was to look at De Bruyne, and that felt like, is he injured? Has he got something? But maybe it was Grealish. But if he says the injury isn't too bad, maybe there's more positive news on that front, because as much as he has been disappointing, he's been really, really unfortunate with those setbacks and dead legs that are worse than ever and injuries at the worst possible time. And you just want him to have a run of games to show what he can do.
Yeah.
Because that felt like it was a system set up for him. And then half an hour in, he's got to go off.
Yeah, and a system set up for him, and a system that he had shown he could thrive in, because he'd already kind of made the first goal. Just really, really unfortunate for him. He can't really do anything about it. And yeah, hope it's not too serious so that he gets another chance in the not too distant future. And
yeah, as good as Foden is, it was a different sort of dynamic after that, because he went on the other side, and it felt like that was the point where things started going against City, and it took another hour for them to fully materialise. But it was such promise was once again let down by injuries. Prediction for Newcastle, Si?
Just said I can't tell you.
Should we just do like 3 or 4 and we'll edit in what could be a right one?
Yeah, let's do that. I think 2-1 or 3-1 City. I think a steaming Erling Haaland will make a difference. And I think Foden might as well. So I will back City, but I mean, you would not be surprised to see Alexander Isak celebrating.
Well, like I say, the Newcastle podcast I've just been on described Isak as the best striker in the world at the moment, and I was thinking there's probably someone else on Saturday who will have something to say about that. I mean, he's in brilliant form, Isak, don't get me wrong, but it's, and also Dan Burn apparently is going to keep Haaland very quiet. But I mean, that'll be a great battle, but it's one that Haaland has generally got at least a goal in when it's come up. So there's lots of battles all over the pitch. I said 1-1 in that podcast, so I'm going to stick with that, because I think Newcastle will score, and I'm not sure. I think 1-1 is probably suiting City better for the reasons that we sort of said, of City are probably better placed for the top 4, and if they can at least keep Newcastle level rather than going ahead, then I think that will suit them and just keep them going. And like you say, as few injuries as possible for Real Madrid. So you're off to Pep's press conference, and then you're off to Real Madrid. So I think we're looking at speaking to you while you're in Madrid for next week on Tuesday. So we'll have a debrief of whatever happens against Newcastle, and look forward to the second leg in Madrid, see if there's any better or worse injury news on that front. And we'll be back next week. You can follow the action from the Newcastle game on the Manchester Evening News as ever, in the usual places, on social media, online, in the paper. Give us a follow where you get your podcast, a like, a subscribe, and a comment, and we'll get around some of those comments at some point. Thanks for joining us, and we'll speak to you next week.